Hi there, I'm David.
And I'm Con, and we're back for another episode of Camera Peeps. As I always say, David, what are we talking about today?
Okay, well, we're looking at lens control for the Fujinon MK series of lenses.
Wow, that looks fairly new. Is this a new product?
I believe it's quite new, and Videocraft here in Melbourne have kindly loaned us their demonstrator. And unfortunately, we've only got it for a few hours, so I haven't given it the full test, but I've had a bit of a look at it. And I'm quite positive about it. It looks like a really good product.
So what does it actually do?
Well, this particular one is designed just to line up with the holes already in the lens, and it's really just to give you control over the zoom.
Right, now these are your MK series Fujinon lenses, which you've been using for a while and you love them, but you have missed certain things that you used to have in your old ENG lenses. What are the differences? Well,
look, working with the cinema lens, you basically, in the handheld situation, look, your right hand is pretty much doing nothing except supporting the camera, and with one hand you have to quickly, iris, zoom, focus, and hit the record button.
All with one hand.
All with one hand, and if you come from a TV background, a broadcast lens, basically has three motors already in there, and the underside of this lens we don't get to see very often, but if I wanted to bring this into, say, a studio environment or an EFP environment, we can plug controls in to each of those motors, and lots of options.
For focus, iris and zoom.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I missed these functions, and I would just say now that the popularity of the cinema cameras the last few years is now starting to catch up with people, and they realise, look, we do appreciate some of the features of an ENG camera, and that's pretty obvious what's happening. There is another company, Hedon, who are famous for cinema motors.
Yep.
They're doing one of these as well, but we haven't got access to one of those, so this is just chatting about this one.
So that obviously gives you control, focus control.
No, this one's just for the zoom.
For the zoom?
Yeah.
Obviously just on the tripod.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
you still can't operate the
Well, you
zoom.
can on FS5 and FS7. So
why is that?
Because it has that hand grip with all
the hand grip.
Yeah. So
because what's the interface on this?
LANC or LAN-C, or however you describe it.
So you just plug the LANC cable from the controller.
And they give you some cables.
Yeah.
And so if you have FS5 or FS7, and I should point out on the Chrosziel website, their videos pretty much feature the FS5 or the FS7. So if you're an owner of one of those cameras, just check the Chrosziel videos, the demonstrators. This is more about getting it on to the F5. So
how do you connect it to the F5?
Well, apparently, once again, according to the Chrosziel website, they have, it appears to be an option to have a different plug that I think goes into the remote plug on the back of the F5. But with, I just grabbed this out of my kit. This is for one of the handy cams, which would have normally be a B camera or a C camera. And I just used this, plugged it in, and I was really surprised how good it was.
So it works.
It works.
That's your zoom demand. What did a zoom demand used to look like?
Well, here's the big Canon one.
Wow, that looks expensive.
And big and expensive, and it's still better unit, of course.
Yeah.
But these, I don't know, $3,000-$4,000, and I think these are about $250 US. So there's a huge difference. So look, there's a few issues. Look, if you're shooting live TV, yes, you would stick with a broadcast spec camera, you would stick with a broadcast spec zoom command, and also, these plugs lock into the bottom of the lens. They lock, they're not going to come out. That plug there, I think once you've plugged it in, a few hundred times over a year or two, it will possibly wear out. If you get caught up in a scrum or something, it could actually possibly drop out. I would still use that in, high-end environment, but, there's some issues like the cost of these things, you wouldn't bother insuring them.
No,
if it got smashed up on a job or it got wet, you just wouldn't particularly care.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's good. We can see it here in the photo on the handle, and it works really well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So can you still, I mean, one thing I remember with the old zoom demands, I've got a Fujinon on, but I imagine your Canon's the same, is you can vary the speed of the zoom?
Yeah, well, on this cheapy zoom command, yeah, you do have the options. You can change the direction, and you've got a slow.
So you've got a switch to go slow, medium, and fast. Yeah.
The way it interacts with the rocker. Now, we've taken a couple of shots. We might roll those shots over us chatting. But I was surprised because I've usually had this connected to like a consumer camera and, you know, just optical zooms and things like that, and it's not quite right. But I was pretty impressed. I found that that it possibly didn't stop like dead stops, like a broadcast lens, you know, but I'm splitting hairs there.
It doesn't do a feathered stop, you mean?
It's probably is more feathered over feathered. I'm splitting hairs, but I would still, it's still pretty impressive. And you know, just things like the electronics, it auto calibrates as soon as you put it on.
Oh, that's good, because I know on some other motors you have to do, especially if you're using photographic lenses without hard stops, you have to manually set your parameters, don't you?
Yeah, and look, the Red Rock Micro, this is the one off the Movi, or that I use for the Movi, and yes, you have to, if you're using a DSLR lens, you have to set an A and a B, or if you put it on this lens, it auto calibrates. I sense this is a very torquey motor, and in the auto calibration, I sort of feel, oh, is that sort of damaging, you know, the lens?
Yeah,
a bit?
if it's too much, it could go boom, boom,
And this, I wasn't wincing when I heard this fire up. I thought, no, that sort of looks all right. So I've obviously got the torque settings right to match this lens.
And that's important with motors and lenses,
Yeah.
because you can do damage to the hard stops on some lenses if the torque's too high.
Yeah, and
I've been told.
Yeah, and look, these lenses, as much as I love them, you know, they don't have the build quality of the Cabrios and the Cine Servos. They were a little plastic, but they're good, and I'm really surprised how smooth the zoom is, and that's just a size comparison with the.
So that's your old ENG zoom demand. So there's a weight benefit as well.
Huge.
Carrying the tripod and the camera and that makes a big difference.
So if you're shooting B-roll around the CBD, which is something that often happens, you know, if you can lighten up that camera rig.
Yeah, the tripod, the camera on top of the tripod and everything, the backpack with the batteries and the spare lens.
Yeah, and if you park the car further away, all those things. So look, I'm pretty impressed with it. I say it affects things like, as I say, the insurance. Like I just wouldn't bother insuring that. The size of it, I think the Hedon, I think, has a separate control box
like your Red Rock, right?
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. One thing I noticed with the Hedon one, they're giving you the option to have two motors. There's like an adapter so you can have one motor for focus and one for the zoom.
Okay.
I would happily consider that, except I've got this guy, so I don't actually need it. But if you hadn't bought any motors at this point in time, possibly you know, the Hedon would be a good one. So we're sort of ripping through it. Now, one thing I did notice with the whole MK lens on the F5, on the shoulder mount, I mentioned before how we push the camera body as far back as possible. To evenly distribute the weight, which I love. But
because that's important, having a camera that sits on your shoulder, you're not fighting pushing it up or down.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I've found was that plugs in there, but in that shot's taken with the camera
in the forward position. But what do you do if you move it back?
Then it doesn't line up.
Oh, and that's a shot showing how you're just holding it there. That's not actually sitting in.
I didn't force it in, but it's basically
gets in the way.
Gets in the way. So look, I think for me, it will require. I'm not sure if it's possible. I think there's right angle limo.
Oh, I'm pretty sure there are.
Yeah. So look, for me, it would be a modification to get that working the way I want it.
And you never know, Chrosziel might even come up with that modification themselves.
They might. But look, as I say, if you come from a broadcast background and you're used to these precision instruments, you know, these are pretty high benchmarks, but I must admit I'm pretty impressed with the quality of it, to be honest.
So slowly you're getting the things that you used to have in your E&G world. And you coined a really good phrase before, which I love, and I want to repeat here so everyone else may hear it. You coined the phrase Cine E&G.
And that's pretty much what's evolved the last 4 or 5 years, and I mean, if you had your time again, I would, if I was an engineer, I would have said, well, let's just take an F800 or the P2 or whatever, let's just take that body and form factor, like you do with like you do with modifying a car, let's take the engine out and put a bigger one in. It's almost what's happening, we're basically ending up with one of these things, and everyone's trying to mimic the form factor of an E&G camera.
Cameras took 20, 30 years to develop and get feedback from cameramen. It'd be good if you had this and keep the switches where my muscle memory is and blah, blah, and it works. They never changed it over that period of time.
No, and I'll keep sort of tweaking this. But, I found using this run and gun, the weight is excellent. But just by the time, there's just a little bit of latency in actually getting the shot, because by the time you make all your settings with the one hand, then hit the record button.
Could be 2 seconds.
Yeah, and that's enough, to actually miss something. So look, the more I can get it feeling like a 2/3 inch sensor camera, I'll be happier, and I'll keep the producers.
Do you think they'll ever someone will, maybe even Chrosziel will come out with a servo zoom?
Like that?
How hard would it be to add a few more motors on it?
I don't know, and it's going to keep evolving. Chrosziel, Hedon, who's next? Might have a crack at it.
I know on some of the other lenses there have been third-party manufacturers who've made some for some of the other lenses. How do you power that thing, by the way?
So the model we have here, the cable, it's the Lank going in there, and then this one is a D-tap. But I believe the kit, if you specify according to the website, the Chrosziel website, if you are F5 or F55, I think they just supply different plugs.
So it goes from that into the remote.
Or the rosy one. I assume it's the remote, because you can't get sort of full camera control in.
So I've got another question.
Yes.
Are you going to buy one of these?
Look, I'd love to. Maybe down the track. But there's so many things, and as we record this video, it's just post NAB.
Yep.
So there's
2018.
2018. So look, there's a few things. I definitely would love to have one. In fact, I'd probably like to have two.
Why is that? To put one on each lens, so you don't have to unscrew it?
I don't think it's practical, and I think you'll wear the threads out if you continually.
Yeah, and you'll drop a screw, and you don't want to be doing that on a job.
It's definitely opens this lens up to more flexibility, which I really like.
That's great.
So I think we're sort of getting through it. The noise of the motors.
What's it like? Is it a noisy motor?
Certainly creeping, slow zooms, and once again we can run some footage. It's virtually inaudible. If you do a crash zoom, you can hear it.
Oh yeah, the motor or the gears crunching?
Probably the motor, I think.
Okay, yeah.
So look, we'll wait and see if the sound recorders start complaining. Sorry, they don't complain. They'll just bring it to our attention.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say about it? Now, with Chrosziel products, I don't have a lot of them.
What's that you got next to you there?
The reason I don't have a lot of them is because you just don't buy them very often. Because they're sort
of you had that? What is that?
Well, that's the matte box, my Chrosziel matte box from the SP Betacam days when we shot 4x3, and then we went widescreen, and I had to get the bigger one for the 4.5.
The wider one,
all that sort of stuff. Anyhow, so look, I pulled this one out of the cupboard to use with my FS5, which it works really well.
Yep.
And then the rotary tray for the polarizer was quite sort of sticky, so I thought, look, I'll pull the thing apart to sort of blow the cobwebs out of it. And I started just looking at it and going, this is really well made. The way the screws are.
It's made in Germany, isn't it? German engineering. Yeah.
There's quite a lot to that, and now I understand why we used to pay so much for them. So
because they weren't cheap, the products. But again, as we always say, always, you get what you pay for. Your Zoom demand, even though it's $3,000, you've had it for a lifetime. Same with.
And these, I think, were $2,500 or $3,000 at the time. But there's still quality, and on there, and they've got the flag that goes with it. And I go, well, when I stepped up to the FS5 and the DSLRs, well, it meant I didn't actually have to buy. Another. So
I guess you saying that means that if you buy this motor, you're guaranteed of quality. There's no issue of. I mean, it's a well-known brand that's been around for a long time, and you're not going to have any issues with it.
No, and I'd say they've cleverly designed a good product, because I think these lenses are going through the roof.
Yeah, I think they're becoming more and more popular. I'm getting the impression, and I think we're helping to spread that news, because you've been using it for a while now, and you're really enjoying it.
Really happy with it. Yeah, look, it just changes your approach to the workday, especially if it is going to be a long handheld day. But it's changed things quite a lot. This site, I will consider it, just not at the moment.
Yep. Awesome. So if that's all we want to say about that, we might close the episode, and I hope to see everyone on the next one.